So good morning. This video is for January 11th and 12th, so week 2. We started off with a Kahoot for vocabulary review. I'm not going to add that onto this video, but just make sure that you are comfortable with the vocab that we talked about last week. We're going to get right into the information, and we're going to use these words a lot. So you'll notice right away, if you don't understand what they mean, you're going to struggle. So please make sure that vocab is something that is comfortable to you. Then we're going to get into Punnett squared notes. We're going to get right into the meat of it all. And then I'm going to do a quick Kami tutorial so that we can use our Punnett square practice on that. Yeah. Okay, so this is genetics in a nutshell. Okay, so here we have our parents. And here we have our offspring or our babies. So I'm going to try to put in some of the vocab words that we talked about last week to know what it looks like here. All right, so at the top we have our parents that come together to make babies. That's how it works. So each individual organism has a genotype. So these letters right here is known as our genotype. Okay, so in this case, we have a dominant and a recessive. So again, the dominant is the uppercase letter and the recessive is the lowercase letter. So this genotype codes for a phenotype. So let's say the phenotype is this purple skin. So again, the phenotype is the physical characteristic. So let's say purple is the phenotype, big L, little l is the genotype. So we have two different alleles. Okay, so these letters right here are known as alleles because they talk about the different variations of that gene. So we have a dominant and recessive. When we have a dominant and a recessive allele, we are heterozygous. It's when we have one of each. So remember, hetero means different. So we have a dominant and a recessive. If we look down here, I'm just going to point these out for our vocab review too. When we have a big L, or a little l, this is known as homozygous because they are the same, two dominant or two recessive, because homo means same. So hopefully that's a little review as to the vocab that we'll be using. Now, I say that this is essentially how genetics works because we start off with parents and these alleles, and at random, they are given to their offspring. So even though you have two alleles, you have a 50% chance of giving one to your child or the other to your child. It's 50-50. So you might give this one or you might give this one. It's kind of a toss-up. So genetics is a lot of guessing and a lot of looking at the probability of something, which we'll talk about what that means here in a second. We use this great tool called a Punnett square to figure out what is the probability of us getting a certain trait from our parents. So let's say that I am a type 1 diabetic and I'm really worried about passing that trait off to my child. So what I can do is go to a genetic counselor and look at my genotype and my partner's genotype, and they could do this test where they can figure out oh, my child has a 50% chance of getting diabetes, or my child has a 25% chance of getting diabetes, or 100% chance maybe. So to do that, we use Punnett squares. Punnett squares are diagrams that show gene combinations that might result from a genetic cross. So if we're looking at two parents coming together to make a baby, what's the possibility that they would potentially get a certain trait? And we literally use it to calculate the probability, actual numerical probability of inheriting any particular trait that we're looking at. When I use the word probability, that's just the chance that a given event will occur. So, for example, if you flip a quarter, you have heads and you have tails. You have a 50% chance of getting heads and a 50% chance of getting tails. Always. That is the probability. That is your chance that you might get one side. That's what we're going to look at. But in terms of what's the possibility or what's the probability of me passing on diabetes to my child? This is what a Punnett square looks like. All right, so to kind of tell you a little bit about what Punnett squares look like what all the pieces are. So it's essentially a big square divided up into 4 individual squares. And you have these genotypes up here. One is going to be on top of the box and one is going to be to the left of the box. And those are going to be the parent's genotype, parent genotype. Okay, genotype because we're looking at genes again, genotype. Inside the boxes, these 4 different genotypes are the possible offspring genotypes. The possible offspring genotypes. So with these parents, what can we possibly get in our children? That's essentially how this works here. So how to complete a Punnett square? It's kind of like foiling in math. But I think the easiest way to kind of teach you how to do it is just to jump right into it. So we're going to try an example. So we're going to create a Punnett square for the following cross. We're going to cross a homozygous dominant, right? Same, both dominant, with a homozygous recessive. Homozygous because they're the same, recessive because it's small. Now, a little extra bit of information that's good to know is that the dominant trait here is to be tall. So anytime you see a capital T, you know that you're looking at a tall organism. And the recessive allele, or the lowercase letter, means short. So every time you see short, every time you see recessive trait, you are looking at a short organism. All right, so what do we do first? Step 1, you set up the Punnett square. Remember how I said that at the top and on the side, you put the genotypes of the parents? That's what we're going to do here. So we have homozygous dominant. We're just going to put that at the top. And it really doesn't matter which one you put at the top and which one you put at the side. It doesn't matter at all. So I'll put the homozygous dominant at the top and the homozygous recessive on the side here. So we have set up our cross. Bam, easy. Now, I'll take these off. Now we're going to complete the Punnett square. So we have big T, big T. So what are we going to do here is just bring these down and put 1 in each box. So we have a big T. So we're going to have a big T in this box and a big T in this box. And then we have a big T over here. So we're going to put it in this box and a big T in this box. For the homozygous recessive, we're going to start here on the left. And very similar, except we're just going to bring them over. We're just going to bring a little t over here. And all the way over here. And same thing with this one. We're going to bring one to this box. And then one to the far box. Okay, you're just bringing them down. You're bringing them down. Now, if I erase all of these arrows, we'll see what we have left over. All right, when we cross a homozygous dominant with a homozygous recessive, we now get all heterozygotes or heterozygous offspring. Okay. Heterozygous offspring. Bam. That is the way to complete a Punnett square. That's just how to make a Punnett square. The next step is now to take that information that you created and to put meaning behind it. What the heck does all of this mean? So we're going to calculate and write out percentages and ratios. Percentages first. So we are calculating the percentage of how many of each do we have. So since we have 4 boxes, each box will be 25%. Each box is equal to 25%. And that makes sense. If you think about a dollar, there are 4 quarters that go into a dollar. 4 25 cents go into a dollar. So each box is worth 25% of the whole Punnett square. So when we're looking over here on our genotype, genotypes again are the genes, the things we cannot see, the letters. So I'm just going to write out how many different genotypes I see. So remember, our options for genotypes are homozygous dominant, heterozygous, and homozygous recessive. Those are pretty much the only options ever. Here in our offspring, we only see the heterozygous. Okay, and because I see 1, 2, 3, 4 heterozygous, 4 out of 4 is going to be 100%. All right, for the phenotypes, remember the phenotypes are the physical characteristics. And we know that the dominant is tall and the recessive is short. So here, because all I see are dominant alleles here, there's only dominant traits. That's all I see. So again, just like in the genotypes, we have 4 out of 4 that are tall. Therefore, 100% of our offspring will be tall. For the percentages part is the easiest part, especially if you remember the different types of genotypes and phenotypes that we have in this particular example. Now I'm going to erase the percentages. And we'll look at the ratios. Ratios. Okay, so for the ratios, we're looking and comparing how much of each do we have. So for the genotypes, remember we have these 3 options. So we're going to compare how many homozygous dominant we have, how many heterozygous we have, and how many homozygous recessive we have. So here, if you're looking through your Punnett square, how many have a big T, or are homozygous dominant? 0. How many are heterozygous, so there's 1 of each? 4. And how many are homozygous recessive, meaning both small t's? None. So our ratio here is 0 to 4 to 0. Literally all of them are heterozygous. Down here for the phenotype, we're looking at the two different phenotypes, which are tall and short. So we're going to compare the dominant phenotype to the recessive. So I'm looking at my Punnett square. How many of my offspring are going to be tall? Right, all four, because we see four different dominant alleles here. Good. How many are going to be short? All right, 0, because we don't see any homozygous recessive. All of these genotypes are masked by that dominant allele, so that dominant trait will show. So our ratios for phenotype are 4 to 0. 4 dominant to 0 recessive. And that's how you create a Punnett square and calculate the percentages and ratios of your genotypes and phenotypes. And I know that's a lot, but we will practice this a lot, so you'll be pros in no time. But at this point, if you have any questions at all, if you're 100% lost, please let me know so I can do my best to help you out as soon as possible. All right, now that we have gone through those notes, we're going to go ahead and get started on a practice worksheet to put all of that into action. So on Canvas, we'll go ahead and go to modules. This is going to be at the bottom of your Unit 1 module, and it's just called Punnett Practice. It's going to be right underneath the Punnett Squares slides or the notes that I just went over. So you click on that. So this is a unit that we usually use a lot of paper, and it's just easier to do Punnett Squares that way. And unfortunately, we don't have that kind of option. So I am going to be using CAMI quite a bit. And if you had me last semester, we used CAMI once. So this is something that you're kind of vaguely familiar with. If you've used it in other classes, awesome. If you're new to it, it's not too terrible. It might take a couple attempts to get comfortable, but you'll get there before you know it. So the first step that you want to do is just download the document. So if you go to this link here and you click on download Intro to Punnett Squares, it's going to go ahead and download to your computer. Then you're going to go to CAMI. So you're going to go ahead and open CAMI app. If you already have an account, you could sign in, easy peasy. If you have to create one, just go to create account. You have to log out so you know what it looks like. And this is what it'll look like if you want to log in or sign up. When you get here, if you have not made a CAMI account yet, just sign in using Google. Go ahead and just make sure that you click on your school email address and set up your account that way. This is what should pop up once you get in there. So because we downloaded this document, we're going to go ahead and open it from our computer. So click on that Open from Computer button. And yours is going to look a little different than mine because Chromebooks are different than, I'm not using my Chromebook for this. That's why it'll look different. That's okay. So it should be in your recently downloaded. It may be at the top. You might have to look for it, but just try to find your Intro to Punnett Squares. And then you open that into CAMI. It might need to be converted. If so, just go for it. And this is the document. So it's just one page, but we're practicing genotypes, phenotypes, and Punnett squares. So to write on this, you have two options. On the left-hand side here are
your tools. If you like to type out your answers, you can use text box. So just click on text box and then click on anywhere you want to go to type. So for example, here I have a space that says initial here, so I want you to put your initials. So you just click on it, type in your writing, and bam. And you can do that anywhere. Yeah. You can change the font, the size, you can make it bolded. There's so many options up here. You can play around with it if you like, but keep it very basic is totally fine. Keeping it very basic is totally fine. Because you all have Chromebooks with the touch screen, you have the option of drawing as well. And using your trackpad may make it look a little weird. But if you want to use your finger and kind of write on your screen, you could do that as well. So you'll click over here on your drawing part, and you'll literally just write wherever. So this is my answer. It actually came out a little neater than I expected it to. Nice. And that's it. And you'll answer these questions. You'll answer these questions and you'll fill out these Punnett squares. You'll give me the percentages and ratios. And when you are done, what you'll do is over here in the upper right corner, there is a download button. So you'll go ahead and download it. You do want to download it with the annotations because that just means what you wrote on the paper. So make sure to download it with the annotations. You're going to export it. It's going to download to your computers. ICYMI export. Then you go to our assignment page on Canvas, submit assignment, and then find it in your recently downloaded folder. You open it, and then you submit assignment. And bam, that's it. All right, and we will go over this on Wednesday, and especially if you are struggling and need a little help. So if there's any questions I can answer between now and then, just let me know. Yeah.